for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson. I'm your co-host.
I'm Katy Steele.
I'm Jack Prince.
We've got quite a bit to talk about today. We have to mention the passing of Bob Dole and the media basically aggrandizing him. Well, we'll tell you the truth about Bob Dole in this show because we don't celebrate war hawks. We also have a Hammer Time segment this week and a great off-the-cuff story out of Italy. So I wonder how you say off-the-cuff in Italian. Any idea, Katie?
I should know this. I'll Google it for you.
Fido Cafuto.
Oh, man. So we've got quite a few topics to discuss today. So before we get started on that, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, or Reason.fm by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can hear us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. Be sure to listen to us there as well. Our quote of the week comes from Herbert Simon. One finds limits by pushing them. That's pretty good. Like that.
Yeah, I've definitely found some limits.
Well, we know who doesn't have limits, and that's members of Congress. We might as well talk about the most recent former member of Congress to pass away, Bob Dole out of Kansas. Apparently he had stage 4 cancer and passed away at the age of 98.
Yeah, lung cancer.
Yeah, that is
Does anyone know if he was a smoker or
I don't know.
I don't know. Because he had his hand that he had to hide, remember?
Yeah, because he was injured in World War II.
Yeah.
And was injured pretty badly. He went through rehab for physical rehabilitation for several years.
But, I mean, he was a militarist with a sense of humor. That's
he
really was.
Is that really a good thing to...
I don't know how he goes on your schedule, your chart of the evil, pragmatic, what do you call it. But the thing is, he was there for 36 years, and you could be like Jesse Helms. If you're there for 36 or 40 years, you go down in a cloud of glory.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, we don't do clouds of glory on this show, not for warmongers. So I have this article. This is published at Jacobin Magazine. This is Branko Marcetic. There's a tiresome ritual that seems to have started with the Trump era, which comes every time an older generation's Republican dies. Actually, I think this was
Trump.
way before Trump.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
This has been going on
canonizing billionaires or millionaires has been going on as long as I've been alive.
Yeah, for decades. Like clockwork, as if every reporter was sent the same sheet of talking points the night before. A stream of articles, tweets, statements, and other ephemera spills onto the web telling us what a moderate force this man was, how he's the last of an era of bipartisanship and civility,
blah, blah,
how different
blah,
he was to the disagreeable,
blah,
corrupt, and often extreme right of today.
Across the aisle, blah,
and
blah,
wouldn't it be
blah,
nice to go
blah,
back
blah.
again?
No.
It was
no. It was
Biden's
bad
buddy.
enough the first time. Of course
Him and
it
Biden
was,
were
yeah.
buddies.
Yeah.
I mean, who isn't Biden buddies with, though? Does he even have any enemies?
No, all the guys across the aisle, he's so easy to work with.
They all are like that. That's why I can't run for office.
That's why I can't even entertain people in office anymore. I can't even entertain the system of politics or of government when it's such a sham.
Because if I ran for office, I'd be like, that mother over there did this.
Well,
that mother over there.
And that doesn't work. We all saw that when I did it.
Exactly. Yes.
They were like, we got to shut her down because she's going off all these mothers over here.
And that's when the city attorney shows up.
And then all her signs are popping up in every major developer's real estate property, and that's how you know, like, you don't got a chance.
Let me continue this article here. It happened with John McCain. It happened with Colin Powell. It happened with George H.W. Bush. Hell, it's happened with Bush's son, and he's not even dead yet.
Debatable.
It happened with Richard DeVos locally.
Yes.
It happened with Peter Secchia. It's happened with everyone.
Fred
everyone they
Fred
want
Meyer.
to hold up.
Yeah.
Well, and they're such conservative, far extreme right people, and they still came out and acted like they reached across the... Like, give me a break.
Mm-hmm.
And none of this... You clearly have the same writers writing the same stories for all these people that you pretend are on different teams. Like... Game's over. We all get it now.
By the way, let me fill you in on a little secret of television journalism. When somebody gets famous, they write up these obituaries
long before
in
they
advance.
die. Right.
Yep. Ready to go.
And they
let them check them half the time. You proofread your own obituary if you're important enough.
Yeah, they just add stuff as each year comes along. I'm sure they've got somebody that does it.
They didn't put into Secchia's obituary that he was in a car accident on the way to a Michigan State game, just happened to be in the same car as the editor of the Grand Rapids Press.
Stop
Remember
it.
we uncovered that?
Yeah,
and,
Mike Lloyd.
I do not remember that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, that was quite a few years ago.
I also noticed that it didn't say stuff about him working for Jeffries before he passed, which is...
For who?
For Jeffries. He went from Goldman Sachs to Jeffries a few years before he passed.
Yeah. And as sure as the sun comes up, it's happening again with former Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, who died this past Sunday at the age of 98.
98. Can we talk about that? How this man lived, at least 30% longer than most average Americans? Congratulations, dude. Leave.
Yeah.
Leave. You had your turn. You used enough resources. You're finished. Bye.
Yeah.
You did nothing for anybody else.
Here's some of the comments that were written in his obituary in Kansas. Probably the Kansas newspaper. Spirit of compromise.
Don't do this to me, Darren. What did I do to deserve this?
Legacy of tireless
Seriously,
effort.
you're not going to make me listen to this today. I can't. It's not even fair.
Should we skip that?
Can we, though? Please.
We can skip it.
You can punish me some other way.
It's certainly possible.
Not the cliches, please.
It's certainly possible to make this case. All it takes is glossing over or omitting every defining element of Bob Dole's career. An alternative account, one that accurately reflects Dole's contributions to the endless political crises the United States finds itself in today, would have made it harder to portray him as generic moderate Republican number 34.
Absolutely.
Was that a Freudian slip? Did you say dolts?
Dole. No, I said
I thought
Dole.
I heard dolt. I swear.
That makes more sense.
Do we need to turn up the volume on? No, that was last week. We blasted your ears, I think.
I just have to share the one, and I can't remember which one of my Facebook friends it was, so please forgive me for not giving you personal credit, but one of my Facebook friends posted an old story about how he once got thrown out of a Bob Dole political rally for holding a sign that said Bob Dole for pineapple.
That's great. Maybe Jeff Smith?
No, it wasn't Jeff. But
Oh, that
I could see
sounds
it.
like something Jeff would do. No, Dole wasn't the worst Republican official of his time or of this one, and to that extent, he does represent an older post-New Deal GOP establishment that no longer exists. Something you could just as easily say about his pal Richard Nixon, whose return few would pine for today. But he was as craven, corrupt, and vicious a politician as any of his era, and had he been born some decades later, he clearly would have comfortably adjusted himself to the pathologies of today's GOP.
Yep.
In fact, he very much did. And for all the tributes to his pragmatism and bipartisanship, Dole's greatest legacy is the casual Senate obstructionism Republicans have used for over a decade now to make the country practically ungovernable. Dole would later say, quote, "I'm a conservative, not right-wing," end of quote. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
At what point do we admit that the government is unfunctionable? I mean, when the oligarchic-owned media can actually say that out loud, at what point do we go to that part of the Constitution that tells us we can actually fix it? What point? Because I don't know if anybody's waiting for some ceremony from the current government or something, because that's what it sounds like.
I know you're being sarcastic, but there's danger in thinking there's a point. You know, like we have thought there was going to be a point where America would awaken to the racial. I mean, I can go on and on.
We keep asking when it's going to be, as if it's going to happen unless we act.
To use a football term, Jack, the goalpost keeps moving. The
does.
Goalpost has been on wheels for several decades.
I remember.
Yeah, and they keep talking about the old Republican Party, and what it really does, it means it's kind of growing in its. It's the old. It's getting better and better.
Yeah.
Bush looks better. Excuse me. Bush looks better. Are you kidding?
Oh, yeah.
His daughter's on MSNBC. He comes out and he has some moderating
Jeb
comments.
Bush almost got elected.
Yeah.
Jeb Bush, you guys. This is where we're at.
So the process means, like Darren says, they just keep changing the shape of the field. Yeah. You never get to the goal line.
Well, and here's the thing. Humans will tolerate anything once they get used to it. So this is conditioning.
You get what you settle for.
Yeah, this is conditioning. We're all getting used to it. We're getting more and more comfortable with the fascism.
And that's something that we mentioned on last week's show as well.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a continuing theme. In practice, the distinction was meaningless. When Dole first entered Congress in the 1960s, he opposed virtually the entire suite of Great Society programs put forward by Lyndon Johnson and the Democrats that would prove vital to American well-being in the decades ahead. Medicare, Medicaid, fair housing, food stamps, and federal aid to education, to name a few. Contrary to the emerging myth about Dole's bipartisanship, he voted against the first three despite the fact they were backed by most other House Republicans. From start to bitter end, Dole backed the disastrous war in Vietnam and didn't care how low he sank to do it.
This is what we call the Republican version of Joe Biden. He's absolutely doing all the same things, voting against things that every Democrat believes in and agrees on, and the Democrats aren't arguing with him about it because I think they expect it. And that way they don't have to be the ones to turn us down.
Really, Biden was more aggressively conservative than some of these guys, like Dole.
Yeah.
Busing, I can go on and on. So,
But Dole wouldn't have had a chance if he would have been as extreme as Biden in those times. He had to be the way he was to get where he was, and that's, I mean, not that he ended up getting where he wanted to be, but he still did pretty darn well with his... Well,
this last week, there were so many projections of how bad the Democratic election's going to be here in another year and a half. It's going to be
there is no pushback in who's going to help us, because even progressives are just totally given up. They're disenfranchised.
Yep.
He excoriated the media for its supposed bias in covering the war critically, alleging an attempted media sabotage that could cost the lives of U.S. troops, and was, quote, encouraging to every damn crook in the country, end of quote. He did the same to his colleagues critical of Nixon's war effort, calling them, quote, the new Chamberlains, end of quote, and worse. George McGovern would later complain about Dole's suggestions that he and other critics were, quote, personally disloyal or unpatriotic or even hostile to the best interest of American troops, end of quote. Even decades later, when he spent years out of power, Dole kept this up, joining the GOP smears on John Kerry's war record in the 2004 election, saying he had, quote, never bled that he knew of, end of quote, and questioning whether he should have received Purple Hearts for superficial wounds.
Okay, can we stop right there for a second?
Yes.
Because I have never saw, and I'm embarrassed now that I'm hearing this. Oh my gosh, it was like perfectly scripted to market a gory war scene and to make it sound like a great thing to go off and get shot or taken prisoner I always knew that, but to actually hear it spoken like that and to know that was the mainframe of their entire election is so gross.
Yeah, you get any military recognition and you can come back and you can be elected.
And the same with Biden. He did Biden's got a war history, and
you lose a foot, you're vice president. That's where the original Bush came from.
Right.
The bogus plane that supposedly crashed. All the survivors said it was BS.
Right.
He ditched the plane
That's
way too early, came back, wrote the article that he was a war hero because he had a lot of money.
This is ultimately a great like play of his whole presidency too. It's like the same thing, right?
Oh yeah,
He's the one that crashed the plane.
Yeah, I'm talking. Yeah,
Very true.
Yeah. No, there's books out there. You'll never see it. I got a story. I had a book called The Fortunate Son about George Bush.
Yes.
Jr. It's out there. You can't get it. I took it to a coaches meeting at Grand Valley, and all the right-wingers were having a fit, right? So I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to buy you this damn book. I'm going to buy every one of you guys this book. There's 6 coaches, all right? I go back to the bookstore. There's a guy ahead of me in an expensive suit, and he's headed right to about the same place. He picks out all of the books right in front of me, buys them all, goes out into one of the black Suburbans. I'm thinking, that's got to be a Bush guy. And I never could get my hands on the book again. True story.
Yeah.
Fortunate Son. That talks about Bush flying over the Gulf of Mexico. Instead of serving in the Army, he was given a plane to fly, and he would take young ladies across, put it on automatic pilot, and then take things into his own hands, so to speak.
Wow. And this is interesting because I'm Googling it right now, and there are 2 things I'm finding called The Fortunate Son. One is a story about CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah, not the one.
Right. And the other one is a autobiography about somebody, Louis B. Puller Jr.
Yeah.
No,
But I'm not
that's
seeing,
not
and
the
that's
book.
a different
Neither
military
one is the book.
but neither one of them is
It's
the
gone.
book.
Disappeared.
And you're right. It's just like not here, which is very interesting.
I think there were death threats against the author.
I believe you. That's crazy. Wow.
Let me continue the story here. Again, this is Jacobin Magazine. There were 2 exceptions to this utterly conventional set of right-wing positions. Dole's horrific war injuries gave him empathy for the disabled and would both vote for disability aid in the 1960s, and he helped shepherd the Americans with Disabilities Act to passage later in 1990. He also voted for both the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965, though anyone wowed by this act of bare minimum moral decency should be aware both bills passed in the House with huge Republican majorities hovering around 80%. Otherwise, he was considered a hardliner, one colleague calling his politics, quote, somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan, end of quote.
Yeah.
What proved most critical for Dole's ascent was his relationship with Nixon. For the president, Dole was a useful hatchet man, as a fellow Nixon loyalist would complain, becoming the soon-to-be disgraced president's attack dog and apologist all in one. Nixon made him chair of the Republican National Committee in 1971 because he could say things which the president himself cannot.
Yeah.
For example, Dole charged that Edmund Muskie was trying to destroy public confidence in law enforcement by criticizing the FBI. Unfortunately for Dole, his adoration of Nixon was a one-way street, with the president largely keeping him out of his inner circle and eventually unceremoniously shunning him from the RNC position. But Dole really earned his stripes over Watergate, which he assured the president was not nearly as big an issue outside Washington. Boy, did they screw that one up. He accused the Washington Post of attempting a rescue operation for McGovern, Nixon's opponent in the 1972 presidential election, and charged the paper had set up housekeeping with the McGovern campaign. He attacked Walter Cronkite over his coverage, prompting even fellow party members to ask him to tone it down. Yeah, because you don't go after Uncle Walter.
That's what Nixon said.
That man told the truth.
When Cronkite turned on Nixon, Nixon said, I'm done. And he was right.
Yeah. At one point, he even authored a resolution to end live TV coverage of the hearings to, quote, move the Watergate investigation from the living rooms of America and put it where it belongs, behind the closed doors of the committee room and before the judge and jury in the courtroom, end of quote. When a constituent wrote a letter objecting to this, Dole told him, quote, you write like an anti-Nixon Democrat, end of quote. So.
But, can't we just put it all in the picture that's, I'm sure, on the national media, where now Biden is at the service? I think is it going on right now, and it just fits right in with the holiday season, the whole shtick of Biden and his bipartisanship. It's a perfect ending.
The old cross, the old Catholic cross, the north, south, east, west,
Yeah, yeah, and his wife would be standing there with the black veil on.
Or north, south, west, east, actually, with the Catholics.
With Biden, it was Dole. With Kennedy, it was who was the Irish? Some other.
Yeah.
They got along. Tip O'Neill. They had lunch. It was all civil. It wasn't Marjorie Greene trying to punch out in the elevator. It was lunch.
Wasn't Lauren Boebert lying on other members of Congress?
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Did you see her Christmas card with the machine guns?
Yeah.
No, really. 3 little
I
kids.
did.
They got huge guns.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I don't get it. Like I said,
It's insanity.
if it's got to be a world like that, it's just not the world I came for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, putting out a Christmas card with your kids holding AK-47s.
Which phony are we going to go after next?
Oh,
Osteen?
jeez.
Or
You know
Smokescreen?
what?
What's his name? Joel Smokescreen?
Let's go ahead and do a little bit of Joel Osteen just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit here. So Joel Osteen made the news because a plumber was sent out to do some repairs at Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church. I believe, didn't that used to be a Coliseum at one point? No, literally, it used to be a Coliseum because Houston Wrestling ran out of that Coliseum.
And it was a Stockyards for a while.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No, it probably was at one point, because what was that? I think it was same Houston Coliseum it used to be.
All I know is when they had the big hurricane,
Yeah.
he wouldn't open the damn doors.
They wouldn't let anybody in.
Oh yeah, and I heard there were people there from my Facebook that said he said they were open, but they were not open. They were not open. So.
Yep. So I've got this story. This is Marlene Langtang writing for NBC News. This is dated December 8th. A plumber who discovered stacks of cash and checks inside a wall at celebrity televangelist Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church last month has been awarded $20,000 by Crime Stoppers of Houston. The envelopes were discovered behind a loose toilet by the plumber while he was doing repairs at the Houston church on November 10th, 7 years after the church reported $600,000 in cash and checks stolen from a safe. Oh, my God.
And so a loose toilet, that indicates that there was accessibility, that somebody could get to it without being noticed.
Yeah. In a statement, Crime Stoppers of Houston said this. Evidence from the recovered checks suggests that the discovery of the, bounty, booty, whatever you want to call it.
Loot.
The loot, there you go, was connected to the March 2014 theft. By the way, the Houston Police Department is still investigating the case. Back then, Crime Stoppers of Houston offered a cash reward of up to $5,000, and Lakewood Church added a supplemental reward of $20,000, bringing the total to $25,000 to anyone with information that led to an arrest. After years of no word on the case, Lakewood turned that sum into a charitable donation to Crime Stoppers of Houston. Following news of the discovery behind the church wall, Crime Stoppers CEO Renea Mancaris asked the Crime Stoppers Executive Committee if the organization could give $20,000 to the Good Samaritan who turned in the money and received approvals, according to the statement. So,
okay, Katie, where do we get to the point where we stop saying these evangelists are just a bad apple and say the whole forest is rotten? Because it continues, he's just a bad guy, now.
Right.
But the entire shtick of Christianity with scaring you to pay.
Let's start with the base issue here, and that is these people are weak and they're easily duped. They're fools, okay? So whether they're good fools or bad fools, they're fools because they literally allow cult leaders to override logic, okay? And once that's who you are,
recently.
right?
Yeah.
And this is it's not an evangelist thing. It's not a Trump thing. It is a weakness thing. That's what I am convinced of.
All right, so extrapolate that, though. We're talking about Western civilization has believed in the talking snake theory.
Yep. There's
and
a faction.
funded from Billy Sunday, did this 120 years ago. This is a long line of snake salesmen.
There's a faction of human nature, of humans, that are inclined to follow versus lead.
A faction, though. We're talking our whole
I'm
Western
about
civilization
60% of them.
is based on the biblical account of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me sum this up with a quote from former Minnesota governor and former professional wrestler Jesse the Body Ventura. I'll try to do Ventura's voice. Organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers. It tells people to go out and stick their noses in other people's business. I live by the golden rule. Treat others as you'd want them to treat you. The religious right wants to tell people how to live. That's a direct quote from Jesse Ventura.
And it's altogether true.
Yes.
My point is this is so pervasive that it's not a faction. I mean, think about this, Katie.
I guess I should look
no,
up
I'm not
the
disagreeing.
definition of faction.
You're absolutely right. It is the weak-minded. They're easily duped. But our whole damn society is Christianized. All of our institutions.
The whole thing. No, I would say our capitalist society is completely institutionalized with religion.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Not just religion. I would say white supremacy, racism. I mean, the ideologies.
Which is all religious.
They're ideologies, I guess, all different ideologies. And they are, but I think that's because it's a majority of humanity is maybe what I should say.
It's embedded.
Prefers to follow versus lead. But that's how we've always been taught that's how it is, right? There's always a group of followers and one or two leaders.
Mm-hmm.
You know the game where you have the blocks and you have to pull the block out?
Jenga.
And it stands? Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we look at Western civilization, what would be the most crucial block that we could pull out? Single block that would have the whole thing cave in.
Capitalism.
See, I think it's Christianity. I think Christianity came and then capitalism.
I think you're right, but I think capitalism has seeped into every portion of not only Christianity and every other ideology, but everything.
See, I would recommend the book An Open Letter to a Christian Nation by Sam Harris. You know Sam Harris, a great philosopher. Very, very controversial. But Sam Harris says what has happened is that Christianity is believed to be kind of like the Bush, Biden, Dole syndrome, that there's this big main body of really not aggressive Christians that are pretty innocuous. They go to church, they have a belief in goodness, they kind of like the principles of Christ. The real bad Christians are the Osteens and the snake handlers and the Smiths. But the truth is, according to Harris, it's the middle road Christians that are ubiquitous, that hold up the whole Western civilization of structure, of believing in a myth, of hoping to pray out of your...
1,000%, yeah. But here's the thing. How do you can't come in and rip out Christianity to take that, to dismantle them. You can't, because that has been done over and over and over. Millions of years they've done the religious wars, right?
They've what?
Mm-hmm.
They've done religious wars. They've done this. They have come
that just strengthens the block of Christianity.
Exactly. That's why it's empowered by it. If you were to come through and rip out every dollar and cent they had, imagine how it would crumble. Imagine the relationships that would fall apart because the power would be gone.
Those would not destroy Christianity.
You don't think so?
I'm talking about a revelation that Martians fly right in the front of the White House. They have lunch with Biden. They have a history of the world that shows a bunch of people conspired to control other people with a belief in a super being. You know, that some kind of unequivocal. You cannot argue with it.
That Christianity is just fake.
Yeah. Now that may never exist because you got a million trained apologists. But if there was some proof, some discovery, something that actually would mean.
Look at the evidence turned up in the Da Vinci Code, the books preceding that. There was evidence that undercut
that's
Christianity.
That's so easily called esoteric. That's what I mean. You could get great, valid proof that it's all a hoax, and they'll work a way around it. But if there was something they could not work around, Western civilization would be totally lost. That's what you understand. It is structured on that cornerstone so solidly, it would have no idea what the hell to do.
By the way, Letter to a Christian Nation is a follow-up to his first book called The End of Faith.
I read them both. The nice thing about An Open Letter to the Christian Nation, you can read it in an hour. It's about 60 pages. And you can take that to the most avid, red-blooded Christian, and it blows them out of the water if they read it. But you can't even get them to read it.
And that's my thing. I guess I just can't even envision anything being possible to convince these people. Because these people, their beliefs ascend anything real. They have taken, and that's what they were taught.
Well, not only that, you talk about a human's immunity. Christianity's immunity, it's suffered attempts to discredit it for centuries, right?
Right.
So its immunity has gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. I'm just theorizing if there was something that would be lethal.
Right.
I'm not saying there ever could be.
I get the theory. I'm just like I can't even wrap my head around what possibly could do that. And that's what to me is so amazing.
And
the institution of marriage, the institution of everything would be
and
gone.
That's why I can't even wrap my head around that because, again, they would find a way to just destroy whatever reality.
Okay, but you have to go with the imaginative.
I know it's just so hard, Jack, because that's how far gone they are.
Mm-hmm.
There is no.
Well, think about it then. You tell me how deep the roots go.
Clearly deeper than anybody knows.
It's impossible to think of its eradication. You can't even think of its eradication.
Scientists don't even come out and attempt to disprove it. That's the thing that really.
Tom Hartman, the progressive voice. He's a big juicy Christian.
Yeah, it's just so.
Which he ain't that much of a progressive. You got to remember what happened after 16.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not going to talk about this for longer than 2 seconds because I already knew this, and we're not going to give this guy any celebrity. But the Josh Duggar guy.
Oh,
big conservative Christian with 8 million children that has now finally been proven to be a pedophile. Mm-hmm. Which we knew when he was forcing his wife to have baby after baby after baby that he was probably a pedophile.
Should be the end of Christianity, right?
Should be. But it's such a known thing.
Trump should have ended when he talked about grabbing the female's kitty cat.
No, this is now becoming an acceptable tenet of Christianity, which is what we're watching happening right now.
Yeah. It's like the argument. You go to an atheist, ask him, what would it take for you to believe in God? The answer is proof. Go to a Christian. What would it take for you to believe that God is not real? Nothing.
There's no answer.
There is no answer.
Because of the magic.
It
was formed by a mastermind.
Yep, we were set up that way.
Then they hired the greatest artist in the history of the world to adorn their churches. Am I right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
People lived in a pile of straw.
Yeah.
People lived in huts made out of straw. Mm-hmm. And then there's this huge structure. Let me look at them. How long have they been working on Notre Dame since it was destroyed? Millions of dollars. They're still working on it.
2 years
It has to be restored. It has to be, or the world crumbles. People could starve in Italy. But I just have always wondered if somehow it could be discredited, what it would be like.
Right. I don't know what they would do.
Every child being told, your dad is not your dad. That's a guy that picked you up from the post office. You're in a baby's carriage. We don't know who your dad is.
Yep. That guy doesn't even know you.
Yeah. What would that do individually to a human being?
Oh,
we know what it does. They're lost. They're gone.
Yeah.
John Lennon, imagine no religion. Right there it is.
You can't do much better than John Lennon. You can't do much better than the book that Katie alluded to. Read it. Anybody reads it, and they'll go, this is a freaking cartoon. It's
nuts.
Hold on a second. I got to do an absolute aside to this because you had mentioned Josh Duggar. So I'll mention the other Beatle. Second week in a row, I pull in here, and on Sirius XM, they're playing the Ringo Starr pedophile song. You're 16, you're beautiful, and you're mine. Second week in a row, I'm not making this up.
Is that right?
How old was he when he sang that?
Well, that came out in, 73,
listen,
and
74?
as a mother of
Had
16, I don't agree that being attracted to a 16-year-old makes anybody a pedophile, but it depends a lot, too, on his age. If it was a power thing, that's when I get issues. I think I can have.
Listen, there was so many pedophile rock and roll songs in the early 60s.
Oh, and
there were dozens.
Yeah.
Young Girl, Get Out of My Mind.
Jailbait, Ted Nugent.
Over and over and over again. There was nothing improper about it. So
Little Miss Dangerous.
What was the
Ted Nugent?
Yep, I've heard a lot of
What was the guy,
those,
the
too.
killer? How many?
Oh, Ted.
The cousin to Jimmy Swaggart.
Oh,
talking
Jerry
about
Lee
phony
Lewis.
Christians, right?
Jerry Lee Lewis
got caught with whores down in.
Well, didn't he marry his 13-year-old?
That's my point.
Cousin?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a couple of those celebrities too.
Yeah. Well, Elvis the King. I mean, he
was
had
dating a
Priscilla
13 or
stashed away when she was
14-year-old.
14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me is a whole different issue when you're talking about power. But I'm like, at the same time, I had a kid at 16, and it was, I had him with a 16-year-old, and it was just a normal, healthy relationship, not pedophilia.
It's 16, yeah. I'm not,
right? No, I hear you.
13, And
but isn't
Elvis knocks on your door.
Yeah, and when it's a power thing, it's never okay. You should never, ever manipulate power over a young girl.
But I'm going to throw back to several years ago on Southpaws. We had a story. I don't think you were with the show at the time, Jack. I think it was me and Jim Gerner and Joe Elder. We talked about a story up in Big Rapids where a 17-year-old kid, or no, his 18-year-old kid, took a picture of his girlfriend, 17 years old, nude picture, got it processed, boom.
With child prostitution or child
production of child porn.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is
17
crazy.
years old?
They were like a year apart. And that's, I mean, I had threats when I had a boyfriend who was 17 when I was 15 of him getting in trouble. And those were the things that really made me sensitive about this. Because I'm like, I know not everybody is ready at 15 or 16. But for me, it wasn't that case. And it didn't seem fair that somebody would consider incarcerating a kid for.
But the line does exist somewhere where a child is
absolutely.
Not,
and for me, it exists with power. Yep. When your age is enough to give you power, then that's a problem. And when you've got other issues that involve power or authority, that's also a problem.
Absolutely. Katie, I know you wanted to talk about the state legislature in Michigan funding law enforcement and how every Democrat was on board with this.
Oh, of course. Of course.
So let's talk about that right now, because that's just absolutely disgusting.
Well, I came across a Facebook post by State Representative Matt Kolazar last week in the House. This is a quote from him. Last week in the House, we voted on a law enforcement supplemental budget. Here are the highlights. $57.5 million to attract out-of-state officers. This funding will allow out-of-state officers to keep their retirement benefits. As a side note, I'm interrupting his quote right now, but as a side note, at least one city police department in Michigan gives tax credits to officers that they hire from out of the state or city, out of area police officers to buy a home here. So you're talking about now they're purposely allocating money to attract them from out of state and giving them credits to buy homes here. So to continue the quote.
Were those school teachers, did you say?
No. Just the police officers. Yeah, they don't value education like that, Jack. Don't get crazy.
Oh, no. Never.
Only law enforcement. So to continue his quote again, it's $40 million to police academy scholarships, $35 million for signing and retention bonuses, $14 million for equipment purchases for cameras and body armor for the police officers, mind you, not the children who are at risk of getting shot up in their school right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then another $50 million for school resource officers. And he says, despite the rhetoric you will hear about defunding the police, Democrats unanimously voted yes.
Wait a second. What Democrats
wrong.
are using rhetoric about defunding the police?
Now, there's that. When he talks about the rhetoric, he's talking about people like me, Democratic voters.
Yeah,
right? Which is why.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you talk about Democratic politicians, they will totally agree with you in public. If you're having a conversation, they are all about defunding. They are not going to give them any more money.
Stand there and say charter schools are not good.
Right.
In public,
right.
they'll say it.
But then they will get up and vote like this every
sure
single time.
And let me tell you where all that money's come from. One-time federal COVID relief and surplus state resources.
Yep. Not a surprise.
Our money.
It's always our money. It's always our money.
It absolutely is.
I want to go to the phrase, though, to obtain and retain policemen from other places.
Why? That is not community policing.
Yeah. See, now, because that was 10 years ago, that was part of GRPS's mission statement, is that the pay would be so attractive that it would attract and then retain good teachers.
Like you didn't already have them here. Like we don't already have good teachers here that deserve to be retained.
But even the principle of worrying about having good teachers, whether we have them here or not, is not even feasible. We can't even get teachers now. You know, the GREJ went down and said there's going to be a day when you won't have any teachers, and the charter schools will be right there to suck up all the vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's happening.
Absolutely.
But we can pay how much? How many millions of dollars to get more police than we already have?
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing I can't comprehend is the more money we give police, the more police we hire, and the higher our crime rate goes. Mm-hmm. At what point are we going to realize we're funding a problem? Like, and again, we keep waiting for a point. I'm already there. We are funding a problem. We have evidence of this problem. Just because a journalist hasn't published it that way doesn't make it any less of a problem.
See, the more evidence you get, I think there's a reality that sets in. I think it's centered around this saying, there's nothing more foolish than the obvious. In other words, when it gets plainer and plainer and more obvious, it becomes more foolish and more foolish to those who are unwilling to admit the truth. It seems to operate across the board.
By the way, this bill has already passed the state house. It now goes to the state senate for further consideration.
Who locally would we go to, state senate wise, to hold them accountable for voting against it? That's our question.
You got a list right there, don't you?
Well, these are the House.
Well, here's the thing.
Representatives.
Who's in the seat?
So I'm thinking right now
Winnie
we've got Winnie Brinks for one of them. Isn't Rachel Hood?
She's in the House.
She's in the House. Okay, let me see her name on here. That means she voted for this, right? Oh yeah, there she is. Green is.
That's from Lansing, that picture.
Yep. It certainly is.
Tommy Brand. When you're voting in the same manner as Tommy Brand, Rachel Hood,
yeah, they're absolutely joined at the hip. We know that. We were railing on this years ago at the 2016 election.
Oh yeah, and I've said it to their faces. Come on, man, what are you doing? You're doing nothing to stand up for us, and if you're not with us, you're against us.
But the bigger picture, I'm sorry to usurp the importance of that to some degree, was the military budget that passed here. In dollars and cents, it dwarfs this. This is egregious. But our country right now is coming apart economically at the seams, talking about inflation. So what is the response from the military? I go to the kitchen table. My mom is struggling, can't pay the bills, right? Food prices are so high. But I go and say, but listen, Mom, will you triple my ridiculous allowance? The family's crumbling, but, hey, we want how many billions of dollars? Right now it's at 54% of the discretionary budget.
Right after we ended the most expensive and extended war in American history. The year after it ended.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've increased our budget.
Yep.
Yeah.
It makes no sense, Jack, unless we want to pay them to militarize and incarcerate all of us, because that's what they're doing with our money. We are building prisons that will ultimately house us, and that's what people aren't seeing here. I don't know what it's going to take for people to see it, but that's the point we need to get to.
We end a war that lasted 20-some years.
The military we are building is going to be a war against us.
Yeah. They're not afraid of the terrorists.
They're afraid of us.
They're not there.
Yeah.
No, they made up the terrorists.
The terrorists are white guys.
We
with
are the
pickup
problem.
Trucks. Those are the terrorists.
But those are their soldiers.
Yeah. But as the FBI said, the most dangerous domestic terrorist
they
is
know
the
that.
white
And that's
evangelical
why they've weaponized them as their soldiers.
Confederate flagged.
Yeah. Let's move on here to we want to give an update. We mentioned last week that Kellogg's workers were going to vote on a tentative deal. They voted it down overwhelmingly, and they are still on strike. So please continue to boycott all Kellogg's products.
Don't listen to the fake narratives that there was some kind of win, because I've seen that in several places, that there was a contract agreement and the workers
but no specific
benefited.
wins.
No, there is no win, and the unions are completely calling that BS. So.
Yeah, this is Rachel Van Gilder writing for Wood Television out of Battle Creek. After union workers rejected a tentative agreement with Kellogg's that would have ended a 2-month strike, the company has announced that it will look to hire replacement employees, basically scabs.
They're already hiring them.
Bakery, confectionery, tobacco workers, and grain millers international union chapters voted Sunday to reject the deal. The union said the no vote was overwhelming. That means about 1,400 workers of 7 Kellogg cereal plants in Battle Creek, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, and Tennessee will continue the strike, which began October 5th.
Because there was nothing to it. There was no substance.
Yeah.
Snap, crackle, pop. There's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Wood TV talked to local 3G president Trevor Beidelman. He told News 8 last week he did not think the 3% wage increase was enough considering the current economic climate and rate of inflation. He also didn't think the contract did enough to protect job security, noting that about 200 jobs at Kellogg's Battle Creek plant are scheduled to move elsewhere by the end of 2023, probably to Mexico.
Can we talk about all of the robotics that are replacing jobs right now, too? They're being automated. It's not just Mexico anymore. Jobs are disappearing, so.
Yeah. Although I will say this, when I worked for the post office, it seemed like every time they automated something, they had to hire more workers to run the automation because
that used to be the case. But as technology improves, that's not
very
where we're at
true.
anymore.
That's the scary part. But there's another part to this story of Kellogg's hiring scabs. This is Sahid Fawaz writing for labor411.org. This is dated December 9th. Labor militancy is alive and well on the internet. Members of the wildly popular subreddit Anti-Work, which, by the way, I am also a member of, are furious at Kellogg's treatment of workers. They have become some of the biggest supporters of Kellogg's union members. So when the company announced that it was looking to hire 1,400 permanent replacements, the Redditors went to work to crash the job application website. The post with the call to action, which has been upvoted 56,000 times in the last 17 hours, reads this way. The workers at Kellogg cereal plants have been striking for fair pay. Kellogg just announced they will hire 1,400 permanent replacement scabs to break the strike, and they are accepting applications online. This is your chance to apply for your dream job. May you have always hoped to be a permanent production associate Omaha, permanent production associate Battle Creek, permanent production associate Lancaster, permanent production associate Memphis. So
what are we doing? Anybody know who the scabs are? Have they hired one yet? Where do they live?
Yeah.
What are we doing here to address the real problem?
Pushback? Are they out there in the parking lot?
Yeah. Anybody got sticks and stones? Because that's what we did during the furniture strike. We armed our kids and our wives, and we had them handle the scabs. But I need to know who they are and where they are.
How about down in West Virginia, the famous coal strike in Loudoun County, what it was called?
I've told the story on this show back in the 60s and 70s. My dad told the story that the union iron workers would throw hot rivets down on the scabs.
I mean, we need to at least start spreading the message. The scabs will be dealt with accordingly.
Yeah, those are the old days when the strikes were in the streets and there was clubs and fights. Now the Starbucks coffee.
Let's talk about
it's a little bit different setting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Latte instead of an iron pipe.
Yeah. So workers at a Starbucks store in Buffalo, New York, voted to unionize to join the Service Employees International Union affiliate called Workers United.
Yeah.
That's one. Another store said no, and a third store, they're still fighting it.
So one store?
Yeah.
One store signed on, and I'm seeing huge articles saying Starbucks is unionized. I've got major issues with that being misleading AF.
One out of almost 9,000
Yeah, let's talk
locations.
9,000 Starbucks locations. We have 2 in one parking lot here in Grand Rapids. So one unionized Starbucks is not a victory.
Yep. Just
support their own workers. Like, come on, man.
Just getting the union is one thing. Getting what you want is something totally different. Oh, boy. So I tell you what, let's go ahead to our next segment. Since I've promised this, we'll play the appropriate music.
Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. We go no further than Fox Propaganda Channel's own Lara Logan, who a couple of weeks ago compared Dr. Anthony Fauci to Josef Mengele, the angel of death during the Nazis in Germany. Don't take my word for it. Here's the audio.
In that moment, what you see on Dr. Fauci, this is what people say to me, that he doesn't represent science to them. He represents Josef Mengele, Dr. Josef Mengele, the Nazi doctor who did experiments on Jews during the Second World War and in the concentration camps. And I am talking about people all across the world are saying this because the response from COVID, what it has done to countries everywhere, what it has done to civil liberties, the suicide rates, the poverty, it has obliterated economies. The level of suffering that has been created because of this disease is now being seen in the cold light of day, i.e. the truth. And people see that there's no justification for what is being done.
Like she really cares about, you know who she's saying when all this bad stuff is happening? She's not worried about us poor slobs. She's worried about the rich not making as much money as they used to, but some of them have taken advantage of this.
Sure. That's profit. Are you kidding?
And she's not wrong about a lot of people comparing him to that guy, though. And that's not everybody is concerned about the rich. A lot of the people concerned about it really just don't trust our administration right now, much like we didn't trust Trump, which, to be fair, there's not a ton of stuff to trust. Do they also not trust common sense and logic? Clearly. Mm-hmm. But I just want to be careful because, again, if another vaccine comes out when Donald Trump gets reelected next time, all of which seems not just plausible but probable, I don't want his vaccine. I don't want it. And I'm going to be using that name, that Josef Mengele, and that's going to be a reality.
Yeah. But once again, what do conservatives do? They take and they run with the worst case scenario
in history for that.
And evangelists.
And scare
twins.
the hell out of people.
Everybody with that cultist personality that prefers to follow versus lead.
I'll put it like this. When Fauci starts taking a scalpel to Jewish people, then you can compare him to Mengele. Otherwise, just like Lara Logan, you are a douchebag. So, Lara, have fun with your award, honey.
Don't be a douchebag.
That's right.
Did you see any
Fox
footage?
propaganda
of the-
channel.
What's the biggest power center in New York? The big theater where they give out awards. Just skip my mind.
Maybe the Met?
The Met Gala is what I'm thinking of the Met Gallery.
That's what I immediately thought of, too.
I don't know.
The
but Biden was
Metropolitan
there
Museum of Art is
to
what,
give somebody an award just last week, and he comes
Times
out.
Square, I mean.
The presenter goes, "It's so good to have a president now in the White House," and the throngs of people in 3 balconies all start slowly rising and applauding.
okay.
And now who wouldn't take Biden over Trump? But
Right.
we're just going from one office to another. And, of course, Fox was all over it. This is the end of the world. All these liberal New Yorkers
Right.
standing to that.
Yeah.
Getting a call.
Anyway.
Shut that off.
Dethroning of Trump.
But you're talking about waiting until Trump's elected. We got problems right now.
Oh, absolutely. That's what but I mean, concerning the vaccine is why I was saying.
Right.
If the vaccine if there's another one and it's completely put out and pushed by him and he wants everybody to take it, are we all going to be as comfortable at this table with that because his appointed scientist said it was good, right? If there's a new Fauci next time and it's not somebody on CNN or MSNBC, are we going to be comfortable taking the advice we're giving out now? And that's where I'm at.
Well, there is an absolute truth scientifically, no matter
Yes.
what president and regime is in office. We
Absolutely.
have to look at that.
I
we have
want
to be smart enough as intelligent
but
people.
they're appointing the scientists in charge. That's the issue.
Here's how you do it.
I would agree.
Here's how you do it. It's real simple. If they give the vaccine to rich people and they survive, take it.
That's what I want to do. But HIPAA makes it very hard to know what the rich people are doing, Darren. They have private flights. They can hide everything. That's the issue. And they will if it's – so here's where we're at. You can buy science. You can buy it.
We've talked about it on this
But
show about the
You
cigarette
can buy
companies.
scientists, but
Oil
gravity,
companies.
if I didn't know a scientist, is observably there. There is
Right. When you're
we are-
talking about more complicated science, it is harder for a regular person to observe. For us, now I see the vaccine works.
But even then, the people who are refusing the vaccine are using their interpretation of science.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
The people who are also using it, the ones that are using it, the ones that are not using it, both claiming they got science book in their back pocket.
Right.
The interesting thing is the people who aren't using it, claiming they have science,
Are dying.
they've been denying science for decades. Their science is the Holy King
Right.
James Bible.
Right.
So I'm more inclined to think that
Absolutely.
possibly the science on the side that's taking the vaccine has merit.
Right.
But
the
not
issue
carelessly.
is that because these sides are just now really actually blending, and we've seen it locally all the way up, who's on what side anymore? And that's where I'm concerned.
I hear
I've
you.
seen the Democrats pick Republicans
I
and
hear
put them
you.
on their team. So now it's like,
Monica Sparks.
do I have the time to
But
investigate everything I need to investigate?
Right. But you as a very intelligent woman that has children.
I have
Have
both
spent-
immunizations. I have a booster.
Right.
I did it
And
myself
came to that
because
conclusion
I logically
without
see.
partisan influence.
But it took me, first of all, I didn't know what I know now. I would be more wary next time because we've been through this time. So, and I would be more wary and want to know more before I would just believe it.
And possibly
Second-
somebody would take advantage of the propensity that was
Exactly.
initiated in this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, see, I'm with you, but I'm also thinking of my grandkids and a
Right.
deadly disease. Whether
Right.
it was made in the lab or it's a weapon.
Well, that's the thing. But that's my concern is we know that Nazi doctor did back in the day force people to take medicine in the name of
Right.
helping them, and that was not the case.
Right.
So knowing that, I just want to be careful on how we call out the people who are scared right now because maybe they're not that intelligent, but they don't deserve to die because they're not that intelligent, And so we have to find a way to actually hold people accountable for science in a way that can't be bought.
See, and also, Katie, you got the new Omicron, and people who think they've done the right thing taking vaccinations, that's the old cat running around.
No, he's on something right now.
The fatigue is setting in, right? Because there's a lot more Greek letters. We're on Omicron now. What's the next one?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now everybody's going Omicron. They've played up as some huge danger, but it doesn't seem like the symptoms here are as severe. So it's possible the next one will come up out of nowhere and nobody will see it coming.
Yeah. Yeah. We're getting close to the end here. I've got 2 off-the-cuff stories I want to hit. Jack, you wanted to mention the guy that burned Fox Propaganda Channel's Christmas tree.
Yeah, he's going to be on the show next week. I've asked him out.
Oh, my God.
I'm hoping he's got enough of a GoFundMe to bail himself out of any trouble he might get in and live comfortably for the rest of his life.
He got released no bond because reforms regarding misdemeanors and bonding, cash bonds.
Did he really?
That's good.
Yes. So that is one good thing. A friend of ours who will probably be joining us at the table here next month described this guy as chaotic good. And I'll post a link to a chart that was published by WNYC New York Public Radio back in 2016 about lawfulness, good, neutrality, and evil, and chaos. So we'll post that. It's an interesting read. But I want to wrap up today's show with this story by the Associated Press. This was published December 6th out of Milan, Italy. A dentist in Italy faces possible criminal charges after trying to receive a coronavirus vaccine in a fake arm made of silicone. I can't believe he tried to do this. A nurse in the northern city of Biella, Filippa Bois, said she could tell right away that something was off when a man presented the phony limb for a shot on Thursday.
I appreciate his creativity.
Filippo Bois told the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera, quote, "When I uncovered the arm, I felt skin that was cold and gummy and the color was too light," end of quote. She said she initially thought the 57-year-old man was an amputee and had mistakenly offered the wrong arm. She lifted his shirt and saw a silicone arm. She said, quote, "I understood immediately that the man was trying to avoid the vaccination by using a silicone prosthetic into which he hoped that I would inject the drug unaware," end of quote.
I mean, that's a whole new meaning for off the cuff.
Yeah. That's good.
The nurse said the man acknowledged that he did not want a vaccine, but to obtain a super health pass, which starting this past Monday is required to enter restaurants, cinemas, theaters, and other venues in Italy.
So, they have to have a super health pass to enter video?
Super multi-pass.
To get into a theater. But what about the dummy? Does anybody care? I mean,
I wonder if he had any symptoms from the vaccine.
Yeah, apparently this guy just has been suspended from work because he's refused to get vaccinated. So,
well, Wood Radio used to say in the morning, it's the best radio station. We've all got wood in the morning. And I thought that was terrible to say, but now this guy, he didn't give him the wood, he gave him the plastic.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.
And on that note, we got to get out of here.
We always trail off.
We will see you next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Katie Steele.
I'm Jack Prince.
For our announcer, Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.